I'm in Svalbard, one of the northernmost inhabited places on Earth. This is the furthest north I have ever been. We're so close to the North Pole, just 800 miles, 1,300 kilometres. That's the distance from London to Marseille, from Shanghai to Beijing. And I think you'll agree that this boat and that backdrop creates a really epic video to send back home. Now that piece of content I've just recorded is about 200 megabytes in size. And every day, people all over the world like you and I are recording content just like that every single second. But where does all the data we're creating go? Well, I've come here to find out why in the future, the Arctic mountains could provide an answer.
Svalbard is home to more polar bears than humans. Only around 2,500 people live here, most of them in the capital Longyearbyen. And being so deep into the Arctic Circle makes it perfect for long-term storage, including a project aiming to preserve and protect the world's data.
Hi there.
Welcome to the Arctic World Archive.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is where everything is stored. It's in a decommissioned mine and it's deep inside the vault. But to go in there, you need a helmet.
Okay, helmet on.
Helmet on, adjust straps. Mine is safe, but just in case.
Brilliant, I'm really excited to go and have a look inside.
The coal mine we're entering closed in the late 1990s. It's where Ruin Birkenstrand opened the Arctic World Archive. He sees it as a kind of doomsday vault, protecting the world's memory. Everything from historical records to scientific documents, and even people's personal data. It was partly inspired by a site just down the road, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, which is preserving more than 1 million seed samples in case food stocks are ever needed in the event of a global catastrophe.
So we're actually going underground here.
We're going underground, but we're not going down as such, we're going straight in. But the top of the mountain is 300 meters up. That's where we have the vault. That's where we store the treasures of the world.
Why did this provide such a good spot for what you need to do?
Well, there's a couple of aspects of that. First thing, it's on this island. It's on Svalbard. It's a remote Arctic island in the depth of the Arctic Ocean between the top of Norway and the North Pole. So it's very distant and far away from all the crises and the wars and the terrorism. And then in this mine, it has some unique environmental characteristics because it's cold, -5 in the permafrost. It's dry on this island, even though it's an island, and it's pitch dark in here.
The permafrost. That's what makes this part of the world so special. It means things will stay relatively cold for the foreseeable future. And the Arctic World Archive won't need electricity to regulate the temperature and keep the data safe.
So now we're entering the mine shaft.
And it is pitch black down here, isn't it?
It's pitch black. We don't consume electricity if we don't need to. So if the polar bear comes in...
I can see the light ahead.
Yes, it's guiding us to the entrance. So now we're in front of the Arctic World Archive.
Oh wow, here we are.
And we're here to protect world memory. You want to take a look inside?
I would love to.
So please, welcome. Let me switch on some lights for you.
Oh wow, it is noticeably colder in this space.
So what you see here is the physical container which sits in the vault of the Arctic World Archive where we actually store all the data. So here you have all the reels, all the treasures from the old manuscripts of the Vatican, to research data, to digitize monuments like Taj Mahal, literature, music, architecture, Nobel Prize laureates, everything.
How many parts of the world are currently included in this vault?
So up until now, since we established this vault back in 2017, we had more than 100 deposits from 30 plus nations all across the world, from China in the east to west coast of US in the west, so spanning almost the whole world.
There are several rooms like this in the mine, with vaults storing digitised versions of historical treasures. The Vatican Library has deposited digitised versions of around 60 ancient records, including a copy of the original manuscript of Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. There are others. In 2020, the software platform GitHub stored a copy of all its public open source projects. That's around 21 terabytes of data. There's also a Chinese art project called A Gift to the Future, with hundreds of photos and videos sent by people all over the world.
This box contains a vision to the future, a message to mankind, or a precious moment that we hope people will save 1,000 years from now.
All of this is meant to remain safe in the archive, in case disaster strikes. But there's another issue to consider besides a potential apocalypse. It's that conventional forms of data storage aren't that secure.
We live in a digital world. Almost everything is accessible in the cloud. That has a huge risk, but if you can access this in the cloud, hackers can access it. So they can steal it, they can manipulate it, they can change it. And here, this is an archive where things can never be changed. It's a non-hackable storage medium. You cannot overwrite, you cannot delete, you cannot add. So what we can guarantee here is that what you find in 100 years or in 1,000 years or in 2,000 years is the exact authentic information. And that will be extremely difficult in the only digital world because you need migration from disk to disk, and it's an endless story of shifting data around, and in the end you don't know what you have. And on the top of that we have now artificial intelligence, which is changing the world and writing new things, and you don't know what was written originally and what was created by AI. Here we have a physical storage medium, completely immutable, so that you can guarantee that this was actually how it was written 1,000 years back.
I'll get into what that physical storage medium is shortly. But first, let's consider the sheer amount of data we're generating. Every 24 hours, the world creates around 402 million terabytes of data. Here's one example. Around 6 billion photos and videos are uploaded just to Google Photos every day. And YouTube, where you could be watching this right now, gets more than 500 hours of new content every minute.
I can see you have all of these stacked up in this space, and it really isn't that big a space to have the amount of data that you say you've got stored here. Is storage an issue? I mean, is the amount of space you have
Physical
here
space, I mean, one day this vault will be filled. But as you have seen, there's a huge mine, there's a lot of shafts, so we have a lot of space to expand and grow the Arctic World Archive. And it's been a lot of work, because this was a completely decommissioned mine, and this was the old fire station of the mine. It was packed with a fire train, a lot of equipment, and just to get that out after 30 years not being used, it was a huge undertaking. Then to secure the concrete, so it's been a quite big effort, but it's really worth it, because now we have treasures which are just unbelievable. You know, the Gutenberg Bible is here. Can you imagine that Taj Mahal in its big glory? The grand monument has been digitized and put on this film, deposited by the Indian ambassador to Norway, just in case if something happens with Taj Mahal. In 1,000 years, they could take it out and use that maybe to 3D print a copy if it's taken down by an earthquake or something that you never know what can happen.
When I look at the different names on these reels, I'm seeing UNICEF, I'm seeing the European Space Agency, I can see the Vatican is over here too. I can understand why some of these institutions might want to store their data, store their records. But how do you decide who isn't worth having in this archive?
Good question. We don't decide. We don't think it's our role to curate what is world memory. There are so many things that has been created by so many people that has put so much thought and energy into their works. So we only make sure that what we preserve and keep here is legal, that we follow Norwegian and international law and don't put anything here that are breaking those laws. That's our responsibility. Other than that, it's the future that should decide if this was relevant information or not.
It's not just the location that makes the vault special. The data is recorded on a unique kind of film reel, which is produced by the archive's parent company, Pickle, on the Norwegian mainland. Simon Fjell Olsen is responsible for the reel's production.
So this is the Pickle film.
This just looks like olden day film reel.
It is 35mm black and white film. Here we have about 24 frames, about a second of traditional cinema film, but obviously we don't think of it in those terms. We think of it, it's about 50 megabytes of data. We have added some special additives to make it last longer, but in principle it's the same type of black and white film that we had for 120 years.
Don't worry, our history isn't being recorded in black and white. It turns out these reels are actually perfect for storing digital data in the form of binary code.
What makes it so durable?
So it's made out of plastic and silver, two elements that are chemically very stable. Polyester, as we know, does not break down well in nature, and silver has been used in cutlery for thousands of years. This means that this film has exceptional longevity.
What is it that I can actually see?
On this film, we have visual information, like images, like documents, like graphs and charts. And then we also have these gray frames that to our eyes just look gray, but they are actually high-resolution QR codes.
The data can be stored in two ways, either visually, like a snapshot of actual text or pictures, or as a QR code.
And you can actually read the document with this one here.
Yeah, with a simple magnification glass, you can take a look at the documents and other human-readable information.
So I can actually see the letters on this document. I can read the words.
Exactly.
But then when I look to the QR code, it's just all grey.
You just see gray. So if we have this, which has about 10 times as much magnification, we can look and we will be able to see the individual pixels. But again, to us, it looks like a QR code or even, a very high resolution, slightly more varied QR code. So you need some sort of reading device to interpret the data, and that's why it's machine readable, not human readable.
Yeah, why do you need those two forms?
So the benefit is that with the human readable, obviously it's interpretable by a human directly. But in the machine readable form, we have much higher data density. So if you think about a normal QR code, it's maybe 20 by 20, we can have a small amount of information. We can have a serial code, we can have a link. Here we have 4,000 by 2,000, so we have way more data. We also, instead of just having black and white, we have 4 different levels. Completely translucent or white, light gray, dark gray, and black. This allows us 2 bits of information per pixel. Combined, this means about 2 megabytes of data in each frame.
What does that actually mean? How much content are you actually able to store here?
If you think about, say, text like books, we can store the equivalent of a small library on a reel.
The cost depends on how much data you want to preserve. Storing 1 gigabyte on a reel in Svalbard requires a one-time payment of around $145. Recording your data on an entire reel costs around $9,250. Here's how it actually works. Pickle software converts digital files into binary code, which is then recorded on the film reels in a series of pixels, again like a QR code. The company initially worked with big movie studios who used the technology to store digitised copies of their productions. But Pickle soon realised it didn't have to stick to just Hollywood and Bollywood. The tech could actually store any kind of digital data.
So this is the Pickle writer. This is where the magic happens. This is where we expose the film that creates the QR codes.
What can we see through here? I can see kind of a bright green light.
Yeah, if you see through here, what you're actually seeing is the image that's being exposed. So if you think about an analog photo camera or a video camera, when you open the lens, when you press the shutter, it lets the light of the world come in and make an imprint onto the film. Here we're doing the same, except we are sending the imprint that we want. So it's the exact same type of process, except we control all of the lights.
So this is the kind of second stage in the process before you move on to actually developing this.
Yes, here you have inside the silver highlights on the film, you have a latent image. You cannot see it, but there is a change in the structure of the silver, which means that when it comes in contact with the developer chemicals, you can bring out that image, and the silver highlights develop into silver proportional to how much light you have gotten.
The technology used to produce these reels might be new, but the film still needs to be developed the old-fashioned way.
It is a very noisy bit of kit. What can we hear happening?
So over here we have the developer bath. What this does is it takes those silver highlights that have been changed by the light and turns them into silver, thus showing us the image.
Given the end result you're creating, it's a bit of a surprise to see you relying on such old technology to produce it.
Obviously, this is an old, reliable, true and tested technology that we have kind of brought new life to by adding the digital element. The next step is over here. We dry the film. So here is a drying cabinet, and then the film comes out of the machine and it's actually ready.
After the film is processed, it needs a final check to see if the data has been recorded properly. And that's done by a machine called the pickle reader.
So this is an image of Mona Lisa. We can restore a digital version of it, and it will now wind to where on the reel that copy of Mona Lisa is and recover the digital file.
The pickle reader uses an open source decoding program to translate the pixels on the reel back into binary code. Another open source software that converts the binary code into the original digital file.
And there is the Mona Lisa.
High resolution, color, digital file, all the embedded metadata, anything else, exactly as it was sent to us.
So the idea behind this is that if the worst were to happen and a file like the Mona Lisa were to be destroyed, well, you have the file here that you can restore it.
So for some files, that's absolutely true, right? So you might have an ultimate backup, but there are also other uses. For example, for Mona Lisa, they can store, let's say, an ultraviolet image of the Mona Lisa, so that in the future, when someone comes and says, I have the Mona Lisa, and someone says, no, I have the Mona Lisa, and there's a question about what is the original one, they can compare them and say, we agreed back in 2019 that this was the original one. We can see which one matches in the ultraviolet spectrum. So you can have kind of an authentication mechanism.
It's incredible to see the detail of this image, but is it just images you're able to draw back?
The file system on the film supports any digital data: audio, video, images, documents, databases, compiled software, 3D models, anything.
And so you've also got video on here. Can we have a look?
Yes.
It's incredible to think you're preserving really important artifacts of human history, but given the amount of technology needed to retrieve this data, is that perhaps a bit of a problem?
If you think about a hard drive, right? If you find a hard drive, you don't know what it is. If you haven't seen a hard drive before, it's a piece of metal. It's really difficult to know what it's used for. And if you don't know the specifications, you have to reverse engineer it to get any amount of data out from it. And there's no instructions. The benefit of the film is that we have the human readable and the machine readable side by side. So in the beginning of every reel, we have a full set of instructions on how to recover your data. It says, this is a film, this is the information that is on this film, and here is how you can get it back.
Instructions on how to extract the data are printed in English and any other language the client requires.
The thing that strikes me, though, is this looks as though it's fairly fragile. I mean, it looks as though that went somewhere and got bashed or scratched. It could be the end of it.
You'd be surprised by how robust the film actually is. So within each frame, there is redundancy built in to cope with small amounts of dust, scratches, or any other noise. But there's also redundancy across the frames. So if we take a scissor, we cut out a frame, and we stitch the film together, we can still read back.
The data is basically duplicated across multiple frames. So even if one part of the film is damaged, Pickle's algorithm can reconstruct the data by picking up the missing information from a different part of the reel. When the reels are checked, they're placed inside these polymer boxes and sent to the Arctic World Archive back in Svalbard, where the company says they're expected to last for 1,000 years. The Arctic World Archive in Svalbard believes it can store digital records for 1,000 years.
Welcome everybody to our deposit 2024. It's a great pleasure and honor having you here. After all the depositors have been presented, they need to take with them their data and their flag and go into the mine.
Dozens of people from 5 countries have gathered inside an Arctic mountain to put their data in a vault that's closer to the North Pole than the Norwegian mainland, hoping it will withstand the test of time.
There's something surprisingly actually really emotional about watching people carrying their reels down this path into the mine, into the vault. And it's a path that people will have lived and worked down, or at least have worked down in order to live for generations here in Svalbard. And so to see that this is now being used to house something that will tell our histories for generations to come, just feels really poignant.
We will now invite you to bring your precious memories and data and deposit them in the vault for eternity.
The data being preserved here is hugely diverse. They're pieces of the human experience, from digitised artworks to financial records and climate change reports, and even rare languages.
Next, Jack, welcome.
Right now, we are using technology and AI to learn so much from languages about population movements in the deep past that we have no records of and never would have been able to figure out. Things from indigenous languages in the US, we're learning about medicines that we didn't know. I mean, we're pulling all this stuff out of language data and rare languages just at the same time as they're all going extinct. And it seems like a problem to me.
Asana Moshi Alemadu Landachi Dakwadon.
This is a recording of the Cherokee language. Only around 23,000 people speak it today. Our memories may fade, but here in the archive, they could survive for many generations.
We are depositing a reel of 554 languages worth of language data. On the more basic side, dictionaries, grammar books, audio files of speakers speaking, so you can get things like phonology, phonetics, how it sounds and everything like that. On the slightly more sophisticated side, we're putting some artificial intelligence, like machine translation, large language models in English and in Korean, and a couple of other experiments we're playing around with.
You say that, and yet museums exist, cultural institutions exist. There are plenty of places that are already documenting languages and lost languages. Why this approach for you?
I am focused on super long-term storage. And another advantage is once it goes in the archive, whatever happens out in the rest of the world, it's there.
That's a huge part of the draw here. In 2018, Brazil's 200-year-old National Museum burnt down. Most of the 20 million items at the Rio de Janeiro site are thought to have been lost. And that kind of risk is much lower in a vault inside an Arctic mountain.
So please step forward.
There's also a representative from the British automobile giant, Jaguar.
I've got engineering drawings, some build records, I've got some sales brochures, some adverts. My favourite is the employees magazines from the 1970s up to the 2000s, because that has such a vast, source of how Jaguar was part of everyday life.
We're talking about a luxury car brand here. Why should future generations know about jaguar? Why does it matter that this is preserved potentially forever?
To me, the people, the social history is more important, and it gives a representative, especially for the future. So I think that people in the future will want to see, what did we do? What did we work? Where did we go on holiday? Well, how did we, get to work? That's what I wanted. I didn't want to make it about the cars. I wanted to make it about the people.
Last but not least is Christian.
Today I deposited photographic footage of the Marshall Islands. I documented 4 islands. My job, my work, my mission has to do with climate change and the effects, the impacts on nation and Pacific Island states. I'm also raising awareness. I try to be a voice for these people. Here in Europe, these island states are like forgotten. When sea levels are rising and your country highest point is like 3 meters, well, there is a problem. So we are already seeing coastal erosion, we're seeing a vast impact on biodiversity, and of course on the people living there. So it's important that we learn and that we remember by the time that it will be under the surface of the water.
The Arctic is a land of extremes. Extreme cold, extreme beauty, and of extreme consequence to our species. It's also warming faster than any other place on the planet. Temperatures in the Arctic are rising at a rate of 2 to 3 times the global average. More sea ice is melting in the summer due to rising sea temperatures, which leaves animals like polar bears less areas to hunt. But the team at the Arctic World Archive say they don't have to worry too much yet.
For us and the archive, climate change is not any danger, because our vault is 300 meters inside a mountain. And the climate in there is extremely good for keeping the data alive on pickle film. But of course for the island, it is dangerous, of course. The ice is melting, polar bears are moving all around the place. So it's, challenging times.
Well, speaking of challenges, what does the future hold?
We have a great plan for the project. So now we are in the process of turning it into a foundation. And with the foundation, we would like to keep the archive secure for eternity. And also an important part of it is to help people that can't afford to store the data themselves if they don't have the resources. So we'll have a fund that can support them. You like to have a snapshot of history, and then you need to take everybody's history into account.
All those photos, videos and audio clips that people save every day, they tell a story. The story of humanity. Think about some of the oldest records of our species that still exist. They're banal things like legal documents and shopping lists, and they provide a glimpse of who we once were. So we need to make sure that the people of the future can find our story and know that we were here.